views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. Tonight's guest is a familiar face who is in an unfamiliar position. He has been on the show many times previously, but mostly as an assemblyman. There recently was an open seat in the 32nd Senatorial District, and he won the special election for that seat. And so now Luis Sepúlveda is Senator Luis Sepúlveda, and he joins us tonight to talk about his new position as a senator, also about criminal justice reform, maybe some politics, also his outspokenness on when elected officials can be removed from office because of dereliction of duty, and other district and state Senate issues. So it's our pleasure to welcome back to BronxTalk the new senator from the 32nd Senatorial District, which includes the Bronx neighborhoods of Morrisania, Melrose, Longwood, West Farms, Parkchester, Soundview, and Unionport, Senator Luis Sepúlveda. How does that sound?
That was a long introduction.
That's all right. I could have gone longer. But how does it sound?
It sounds good. I mean, we worked hard. We've been in the community for over 30 years now, doing some good stuff. So to get here and to be honored by the voters in that capacity, it's been a fantastic experience.
I'm sure I asked you this while you were running and when we did the debate and everything else, but I'll re-ask the question. Why did you want to go from the Assembly to the Senate?
Well, public service has been in my bloodstream for a very long time. My family, my son, we've all done community service. They've all been in helped me over the years in my runs for political office. You get to meet so many people. You get to help so many people. I succeeded in 2012 to the Assembly. I was there 6 years, and it was one of the most gratifying experiences of my life. A lot of the stuff that we did policy-wise, fighting for the budget, fighting for education, our seniors, things that are just so fundamental to our communities. I did it in the Assembly. Now, with then Senator Ruben Diaz, senior now councilman, going to the council, now I jumped into that position so that I can do the work that we did in the Assembly. I really want to do the same kind of great work for the community that I'm going to represent now, which is about 317,000 people.
Which is much larger than what an assembly district,
about
80,000 or
No, it's about 125,000.
125,000.
Yeah, a little less, but yes.
Okay. So you get to more people, but the politicking is a lot more difficult. Certainly in the Assembly, you were in the vast majority.
Yes.
And now you're not even in the majority. We can talk about the prospects for that changing. But does that make it difficult or more challenging? Well, one would think it does.
I mean, it certainly makes it more challenging because in the Assembly, the legislation, the budget, pretty much since we are an overwhelming majority in that body, the Speaker, Carl Hastie, the members of the Assembly control the policy and legislation. And so when you're in the majority and you are the person that is in charge and in control of these policies and legislative pieces, it's easier than when you're in the minority, as we are. To get our substantive bills, our policies put into place, we have to go right now through the Republican plus one led state Senate. So it makes it more difficult for us to pass legislation. It certainly makes it more difficult for us to get more resources to spread through our communities. But it's a challenge that I welcome. It just makes me work that much harder. And so far, I mean, it's been a wonderful experience. The leader has shown me kindness, has been very interested in making sure that we have Andrea Stewart Cousins, Senator Cousins. She's made sure that we have the resources that we need in the senatorial district. There was no interruption with the great work that Ruben Diaz was doing. They wanted to make sure that we continue the great work, and she has been nothing but a godsend for the people of the 32nd.
Talk to me, and is there a difference in terms of the daily job? I think this would be interesting to people to know. Is there a difference? I mean, the politics, we've already articulated what those are, and the dynamics may be a little different. Is the job a little different as a senator and assemblyman, or is it simply that you're covering much of the same district and just, with kind of a larger responsibility?
Well, there's some fundamental differences between the two. One is, again, that I am not in the majority.
Right.
The legislative process is a little, I think, more informative at the Senate level because there are less of us. So the Senate just has to spread these resources to give us information about bills and legislation. The Speaker has the toughest task because he has to deal with 110 members. The ability to get to know some of the members and work with some of the members is easier because instead of me being one of 150, I am one of 63. You get to have more exchanges with individuals that come from the northern part of the country. New York State, many people don't know, is an agricultural state. And when you leave, when you're south of, let's say, Yonkers, up north, there's a whole different world. They have different priorities. These are individuals that are big members of the NRA. These are people that like, fishing and things that normally we don't see a lot of in the city. It's a whole different world. So you get to interact with them more often and get to understand, not agree, but get to understand and try to respect policies that you think you can work with. But it's just a fantastic place to work.
And maybe in some ways requires you to be more of a statesman, so to speak, is that you've got to incorporate a larger vision than maybe you had as an assembly member.
Oh, no.
Just guessing.
Without a doubt, absolutely you do. You have to work with your members in your assembly that comprise your senatorial district. I have great guys like Mike Blake, Marcos Crespo, I have Latoya Joyner. In the city council, I have great people like Ruben Diaz, I have Vanessa Gibson, and I have Rafael Salamanca. So I'm fortunate to have such a great cast of characters working alongside me because they make our lives easier. And so it's been great. I mean, I can't keep saying it enough.
All right, fair enough. Now let's roll up our sleeves a little bit. You got committee appointments?
Yes.
And you want to tell us what they are?
Well, the one that I really enjoy is the Committee on Criminal Justice and Corrections.
We'll talk about that in a few moments.
Right, that's close to the heart here. Judiciary, that's another one. Me, myself being a practicing attorney for a couple of decades. I certainly am appreciative of that. Transportation. I'm now attempting to pass some substantive bills regarding Uber that went through that committee. I also have economic development. So, it's certainly committees that I know that I'm going to do some great work in and I'm going to enjoy.
Knowing you for a number of years, and I did a little count, I think this is about your 17th
right?
appearance on
Yeah.
the show, which means you've been here a lot, and we've talked about a lot of issues over the time. The list you just gave me, judiciary, criminal justice, these are exactly the things, if I had to make a list, I wonder what Senator Sepúlveda would be interested in. That would be it. Let's talk a little bit about criminal justice. I thought it was fascinating, and I couldn't comment during the debate that we ran when you were running for this seat. And that was right after the mayor had selected Mott Haven as a site for the jail. You were very clear to say, you know what, I think it ought to be closer to the courthouse. That was your stated position then. I assume you still agree. But very recently, you mentioned Councilmember Gibson and Assemblywoman Latoya Joyner. They ran a protest and said, you know what? Not in my neighborhood. How do we resolve this? And do you then go back to them and say, you know what? It still is a better idea to have it in your district.
Well, I mean, it's always difficult because nobody wants prisons in their backyard. When we had a discussion about that, we were talking about alternative sites. I never said it was my preference to have it by the courthouse. I think logistically speaking, it makes sense. But no matter what you believe, you still have to take the pulse of your community. And if your community does not want that there, it'd be very difficult for us to then try to push for that holding prison, whatever you want to call it, at that location. So it's a very sensitive topic. We're still looking at options. I'm not set on any particular site. But certainly, we can't ignore the fact that with things like raise the age and people's desire to want to shut down Rikers, something has to happen to these individuals. So we're still working on it. There's still a lot of back and forth going on. Some of my colleagues are dead set against it.
Against the one or something near the courthouse.
Or it depends on what area you represent. Some people are dead set against the area proposed by the mayor. You know, these are things that are difficult, requires leadership, and you try to come up with the best compromise. And that's what certainly I like to think how I want to handle it. But you know, I'm not married to any particular site yet.
So on your 18th appearance, we'll come back and ask you that question. But I do want to ask, you were a supporter of Mayor de Blasio from the get-go, in fact, bucked some of your colleagues in the Bronx Democratic Party over that.
Well, I wouldn't say bucked, I said I had a difference of opinion.
Had a difference of opinion, fair enough. I guess I was using a media word there. Did the mayor do the Bronx wrong by selecting the site without having dialogue with elected officials about it? I mean, did he make an error, and many people were frankly offended by how he handled it?
Well, I don't think the process was one of their finer moments. Absolutely not. I mean, I think there should have been a discussion with the leadership, but you have to also look at things from his perspective. Why didn't he do that? Was he worried about, you know, other forces trying to stop the process, trying to stop where they were trying to set it? It's very complicated with these things that the mayor, people at that level have to do. It's not so simplistic. But certainly I wasn't one of the elected officials that appreciated not being told from the onset. It's not my district. It's Senator Marcos Serrano's district, Jose Marcos Serrano's district. But certainly you should always involve the community and certainly the political leadership when you're going to have such an important structure being built in a county that people live in, that you represent. The best practice is always to get the community involved, and I think that the mayor probably should have done a better job with that.
Let's talk about another hot button issue that is going to likely come your way one way or the other, and that's the mayor's push now to say to the NYPD, don't arrest people in the street for smoking marijuana. Right. Do you support what he's doing here? Fascinating interplay in the Bronx, which many people believe is, and I think correctly so, is a so to speak blue county. Yes. And I think the assumption would be that people in the Bronx would say, "Oh, great!" And we know that the numbers of people of color being arrested are extraordinarily high. But then a story came out in the New York Post the other day that said the Bronx is against it. Where do you stand on this policy? And how do you see this playing out amongst your Bronx elected colleagues?
Well, first of all, Gary, let me tell you that anything that the New York Post writes, I take with a severe grain of salt. So I wouldn't use that as an example, but certainly I understand what you're saying.
Let me just add, as somebody who's very interested in Bronx media, I thought their headline was wrong because they made a statement that the Bronx was against it. Some in the Bronx are against it, and we're much more diverse than that. But go ahead.
Well, Gary, when it comes to marijuana, I look at a holistic approach. First of all, let's talk about the medicinal effects, all of the positive things that happen. We have this problem with opioids now in the state. There's clearly medical data evidence that you can use marijuana and the effects of marijuana to certainly substitute painkillers, for example, with opioids. You look at people who have certain types of cancer that can't eat, have lost their appetite. You look at individuals with glaucoma. Pain, in terms of pain reduction, it works the same way. Anxiety, stress. So it has the types of medicinal effects that, to me, how do you justify allowing people to drink alcohol, which has a much more destructive impact on your body? If you're going to allow people to buy alcohol, then it doesn't make sense to me why something like marijuana, which is a lot less destructive to your body and has all these medicinal effects, it just doesn't make sense to me. Now, let's look at it from a criminal justice perspective. Myself working in the courthouse for many years, I see that generally speaking, when you look at, for example, marijuana arrests, these youngsters, because of these arrests, get a scarlet letter. It makes it more difficult for them to get jobs. It makes it more difficult for them to get scholarships. It just makes their lives extremely difficult for them to progress and become the best and attain the highest levels of professional capacity that they can, be it doctors, lawyers. So kids are knuckleheads by design. You have a couple of kids that are going to go and smoke a joint in the corner, and you're going to scar them for the rest of their lives for an arrest. Also, in our communities, African American and Latino young men and women do not smoke marijuana at any higher rate than white kids do. But the arrests, an overwhelming number of the arrests are in our communities, over 87%,
right,
as compared to the white communities. Now, obviously police, and they've accounted for several factors in this one study that was done. Police just are not arresting white kids. They're not going to the
the same
neighborhoods
rate.
at the same rate.
So let's
so
move
why
this forward.
why not legalize it? So you can also collect revenues. You can pay for school budgets. I mean, it makes no sense.
So you support this idea of not arresting, legalizing it and not arresting people who are caught in the street?
Oh, I mean, unless it's massive quantities, but absolutely, I support it, and I think it's good policy.
You have taken, I guess, a lead, one of the bill signers of this whole idea of a sexual assault situation with Uber and Lyft. Talk to me a little bit about that whole thing. And I mentioned to you, because we were talking about it before the show, and I said, well, it seems like a rather nuanced kind of thing, but you've taken this as kind of an important item to undertake, almost like your first one in the Senate. Tell me a little bit, not necessarily the very first, but tell me a little bit about why you're so passionate about this and what it's all about.
There's so many young men and women in this city, in this state, that use ride-sharing program software and companies like Uber and Lyft. A lot of young women. There was a report in CNN that over 103 or 4 young women have been sexually assaulted while using a ride-sharing cab. Now, you don't anticipate these kinds of things happening when you're going into Uber. You figure it's safer, you're using your credit card, you know who the drivers are, but that's not always the case. The problem was that if a woman is sexually assaulted, they had to seek redress pursuant to an arbitration agreement that Uber creates when you use the app. You don't even know that this arbitration agreement is what's enforceable in the event that you want to sue Uber.
Because you've just basically clicked
clicked
accept.
on and on and on.
Like all the other items that you say, okay, accept, so you can use the service.
Gary, I am an attorney by profession. 6,000 words in this disclaimer. And within those 6,000 words, 1,000 words are snuck in there that has to do with litigation. Arbitration agreements are created by companies for a reason, because they're favorable to the company. So if a woman is sexually assaulted, why should she subject herself to an arbitration proceeding and not be able to go to a traditional tribunal and sue Uber, sue whoever has to be sued, for them being assaulted in a way, violently assaulted in one of their contracted drivers?
So it seems like a relatively simple thing, and that is simply get that language out of the agreement. Is that
That's
what
it.
we're
You cannot, when it comes to sexual assault, you cannot compel anyone to have to proceed pursuant to an arbitration agreement. You have to allow them to bring a case in a regular tribunal.
Status of this process?
Well, the day after we submitted the bill for a bill number in the Senate, the very next day Uber agreed not to use arbitration clauses anymore, and so did Lyft. However, I mean, that's certainly a step in the right direction, but that doesn't mean that the following day we could say, you know what, we're going to reinstate the arbitration clauses.
So they said yes, but you never know what. So you really got to make it.
We got to make it by legislative fiat to make it work.
Speaking of sexual assault, just obviously horrible story about our former Attorney General Eric Schneiderman being alleged to have abused a number of women, and he stepped down from public office. You are in the process of putting out some opinion pieces on being able to remove people before it gets to the point where they resign. Senator Schneiderman apparently resigned of his own volition. There was certainly a lot of pressure on him to do so. What is the kind of legislation you'd like to see that would change if, God forbid, something like this were to happen again in the future?
Well, I back in 2016, when I was a member of the Assembly, I proposed a bill that we call the Recall Election Bill. And it creates a process by which the electorate, like some places like California, will allow the voters to go and have a recall vote to recall anybody who was elected. So the governor can always be impeached, right? If he doesn't behave the right way and he doesn't resign, that's the process. But what happens to the controller? What happens to a state senator? What happens?
Or the Attorney General.
Or the Attorney General. So what we want to do is we want to create a process where, in case the behavior is so egregious and the elected official refuses to step down, that we have a process in place that allows a recall vote to remove this elected official. It's not a novel concept. It exists in other jurisdictions.
Does it open the door for some very serious politicking that somebody says, and I don't want to pick anybody's name, but they find a senator who's somewhat controversial and they get a lot of people together and they say, you know what, let's get this guy out of office. Does it start to take the electoral process not very seriously because it gives you some redress to get him out of here?
But look at major cities and states that have recall elections. You haven't seen this big push to recall because of politics. You don't make the process simple. There's certain threshold numbers that have to be reached before you can then invoke the removal of the elected official. We have created a form with an explanation on how we can get to remove someone, and we've put in certain things so that attempt to minimize the political process to make it legitimate. Nothing's perfect, but you can't let perfection stand in the way of progress. Thankfully, Schneiderman resigned. But next time it could be someone who says we're not going to resign.
Let's say he did not resign, and he was then going to be still trying to do his very important and very difficult job in the middle of being accused of some very serious issues. What you're saying is then the public should be able to do something to get him out of there.
That's correct.
That's the point.
Let's look at what's happening in D.C. today. We don't know what's going to happen there, but certainly you can have a situation where who knows what's going to happen. You can have a constitutional crisis coming up because of something like this.
Talk to me about the Senate Latino caucus.
Yes.
Frankly, and I've got my ear to the ground, you don't hear a lot about the Senate Latino caucus.
Right.
You have made a point of saying, I'm up here now, and I want to put something together. Talk to me about where it's at.
I mean, let's be fair. It's not just me. The caucus has existed. The chair of the caucus is Martin Dilan. We have 6 members total, myself, Senator Alcantara, Peralta, Gustavo Rivera, also from the Bronx, and I think I've gotten all 6. Oh, and Senator Jose Marco Serrano.
Of course, yes.
So the Bronx has 3 members of the caucus of the 6. So we came together recently and said, let's start working and start, looking through policies, legislation, budgetary issues that impact the Latino community. We all work with other caucuses. I am the vice chair of the Black, Puerto Rican, Latino, Asian caucus, Hispanic Asian caucus. Gustavo is a member. So it's not like we're exclusively only looking at Latino policies, but it's, we have a belief that in many cases, Latino policies are ignored or are not given enough attention. And I think it's incumbent upon us as Latino leaders in the Senate to make sure that we say, wait a minute. You're looking at policies, you're looking at budgets. They're issues that are important to us, translations.
I was going to ask you which issues you think are important.
Oh, let's start real simple. Let's start with the DREAM Act, right? The governor every year talks about pushing for the DREAM Act, and then nothing happens. You talk about things like bilingual education, schools in the communities, that funding for the communities that we represent. You talk about farm workers. A lot of the issues that involve farm workers are members of the Latino community. So there are a lot of issues that we up there, I feel, aren't giving enough attention to. And so my colleagues that, they've been there longer than I have, and I defer a lot to them, but we are coming together and we're making sure that no more. We want to make sure that we get our place at the table.
What would be a process that would enable you to do that? I mean, 6 is not a lot. Mm-hmm. How do you form that into a group that gets some political sway?
Well, look, the leader from the very beginning when we started said to us, I'm glad that you're doing it. Let's work together and come up with policies. So for one, you work through the leadership. So whereas it'll be our responsibility to let our leader know what's important to us and how strongly we feel. Plus, you can meet as a caucus with other members of the Senate, and so they can see your perspective. It's not going to be easy. It never is. But I think as a caucus, us together, we have a stronger voice. We can all share ideas. We can all support each other's legislation. And with that kind of cooperation, you can only have good things happening.
Let's talk about an issue that has not done well in the Senate, and I'm curious as to what you think about it. Has not done well in the state of New York, and that is the idea of congestion pricing. Obviously, our buses and subways are in need of serious repair. Are you in favor of congestion pricing? Where are we at?
I was in favor of congestion pricing as long as the burden of congestion pricing is not felt or carried primarily in the backs of people of the community they represent. with paying tolls and things like that. We want to make sure that the Bronx doesn't bear the burden. A lot of people from Jersey that come and work in the city, where are they going to park their vehicles? They're going to come here and try to park their vehicles in this area. So in concept, congestion pricing is great, but it's the details where we usually run into trouble.
And so you're no further thought on that, on how to pursue it?
Well, let's see. I mean, it's a discussion that we're continuing to having now.
All right, maybe, again, on your 18th appearance,
yes,
you could come back.
Give me an incentive to come back for the 18th time.
Other than some of the things we've mentioned, is there anything on your? We got about a minute left. Is there anything in your on your plate that you'd like to see?
Well, this Uber thing is something that's very important to me. I think this is potentially a big mess, so I'm pushing that.
Mostly because the popularity of these services
it's extremely popular,
incredibly growing.
But just in principle, also, I despise arbitration agreements, and I think we should get rid of them throughout on other businesses. But we're going to work with this. The arbitration agreement with Uber still applies on the basis if it's a discriminatory claim. So that's why we need to start with this and then open it up so we can include other types of problems that Uber and Lyft have.
Senator Luis Sepúlveda, a pleasure always to have you, whether you're an assemblyman, a senator, although we have to mention you even before you were an assemblyman.
That's correct.
I think you were on this program. I think we talked about the Cross Bronx Expressway long time ago.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, Senator, congratulations
Thank
on
you
the
so
new
much.
position.
Thank you.
And we'll have you back. You've always been a great guest, and we'll roll up our sleeves every time you get here.
All right, well, we had more hair when we first started here.
I was trying not to mention that. All right, he was telling it like it is. Thank you so much. And if you have further questions or comments on anything, I thought you wouldn't notice. Anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, and email them to us at BronxTalk@BronxNet.org. You can send us a tweet at BronxTalk or post them on our Facebook page, and we'll read them on the air during a future edition of our program. You can check out our archives at BronxNet.org. You find Bronx Talk by following the watch menu on the new BronxNet website. We thank our producer is Helen Greenberg, our director William Guzman. We will see you next week. Good night.
All right.
They said I have troll teeth.
That my voice sounded like a possessed baby doll.
That no one would ever love someone as stupid as me.
That I was fat, ugly,
Disgusting.
The effect of bullying is potent.
We will no longer be the silent majority.
Now, when you see online bullying, there's something you can do about it.
We're gonna take action with the I.
I am a witness.
I am a witness.
I am a witness.
I am a witness.
I am a witness, and so are you.
If you want to stay in the know about the latest happenings en español, check out Diálogo Abierto, BronxNet's own Spanish show, Wednesdays, 6:30 p.m. on Channel 67. The latest in news, arts, culture, politics, and what's going on in your neighborhood. Diálogo Abierto, the best way to stay connected in Spanish. See you there. Te esperamos.